How would you feel about being in a career in which you had absolutely zero freedom? Hey there, it's Adam from Smart Cut Careers, and this is part 3 of my series of videos all focused on this book, So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And in this video, I am focusing on the theme of control. So to review the 3 core ideas from Newport's book, I've been sharing this acronym SCM or SCHEME. And the 3 core ideas that Newport emphasizes are skill, control, and mission. And in this video, I'm focusing on the idea of control. Other words that we could use instead of control would be words like autonomy, freedom, or independence. The point of this factor, and the reason that it's so significant, is that people who are satisfied in a career typically have a reasonable amount of independence or freedom or autonomy in their job. They are allowed to make a certain number of significant decisions. Now, why does this matter? It matters because people want to feel that they have a certain amount of agency in what they do. They want to feel that they can make decisions that have an impact on their life. And the more areas that we feel that we have that freedom, typically, the more satisfied we feel. And so having a certain amount of control, a certain amount of autonomy in your work, in your career, will typically bring a deeper sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in what you do. If you contrast this with a job or a career in which someone lacks freedom or control, oftentimes folks are discouraged or depressed when they are constantly dealing with being told exactly what to do all of the time, and they're not given any autonomy or freedom or independence in their work. Now, there are plenty of jobs out there that have very little or no control or autonomy associated with them, and they tend to be the jobs that are in the biggest supply. They are the most available jobs. But that is because they tend to be the lowest paying jobs. There's nothing wrong with these kinds of jobs. And in particular, if you haven't had a job before, or you've only had a couple of jobs, you don't have a lot on your resume, this might be the kind of job that it makes the most sense for you to pursue. But you should go into it knowing that in all likelihood, you will be told exactly what to do all the time, and that you will not have very much control, maybe no control, over the decisions that are being made that relate to your work on a day-to-day basis. On the flip side, the people who have the highest paying careers, typically the people who have the most secure careers that they can stay in for the longest amount of time, those people tend to have the most control, the most autonomy over the decisions that are being made that impact them in their career. And this makes sense. If someone needs to be managed by another person, if someone else is having to make decisions for a worker who, let's say, hasn't worked as long in that workplace, or has a lower set of skills, or who lacks experience, that person's work, in a sense, is going to have to be subsidized by the work of someone else. In effect, someone else is going to have to be paid to help make the decisions. One famous example of a career with a good amount of control is engineering at Google. Google engineers are famously given what is called the 20% rule. Effectively, engineers are allowed at Google to spend 20% of their time each week investigating some kind of creative idea or project. They're given that freedom because Google has found that it makes their engineers more satisfied, and it encourages them to think creatively. And this has actually been the starting point for many of Google's most famous products, including Gmail. This is, of course, a kind of a gamble for the business that gives freedom to the employee to make these kinds of decisions. It makes sense at a place like Google, where the engineers typically have demonstrated a high level of competence, experience, and knowledge before they're given that freedom. It's more difficult for a business to give this kind of latitude or freedom in decision making if an employee has less experience, less knowledge in an area. And that's why newer employees typically are not given a lot of control or a lot of autonomy. And this is why Cal Newport points out in his book that while the desire for control is natural and most employees crave it in their career, one must be very careful not to seek control too early. In other words, expecting to have a high level of independence or autonomy in your career when you're very early is not realistic. In most cases, it is not in the best interest of a business to give a lot of latitude or a lot of freedom to someone who is relatively new. As a result, Cal Newport makes the recommendation that you need to be patient if you are hoping to have more control in your career. It's necessary to first show that you are good at that job and to bide your time and to wait until it is more appropriate and you have more leverage to start requesting more autonomy in your career. Newport mentions three things in particular that he cautions people should be careful about as they're thinking about control and how it relates to their career development. Number one, Newport says to be careful that you aren't seeking control in a career until you have first established skill. Again, going back to that concept from the last video that I made, skill is so crucial. And unless you've shown that you're actually really good at the thing that you're doing, and you've done that for a significant amount of time, asking for control from an employer is not realistic. They're probably not going to give it to you. Number two, Newport points out that if you've established a good level of skill or mastery and you've proven in your workplace over a significant amount of time that you can do that thing well, you must be aware that it will frequently take a significant amount of negotiation. In general, employers resist giving employees more control because they see it as a liability. They see it as something that will require even more managing and oversight, and they see it as something that could ultimately cost the business if the employee uses their control ineffectively. A great example of this is the whole debate over remote work. Ever since lockdown in 2020 and COVID, a lot of people have wanted to work remotely. And over time, we've seen more and more businesses remove their remote work policy or greatly restrict it. The reason they've done that is because they've seen that a lot of employees abuse the autonomy that they're given when they're working remotely. Certainly, it's not every employee. It's not everyone who's a remote worker. But the fact is, some people see remote work as an opportunity to not work as hard, to not put in as many hours, to not achieve the same standard of excellence. The third thing that Newport cautions when we're thinking about control as relates to our career is the timing. Newport points out that many people will quit a job or try to start a business, or they will make a drastic change in their career trajectory before it makes sense from a profitability standpoint. Don't hazard your ability to be gainfully employed just to try to secure more control. Wait until your finances are in good shape before you quit that job, start that business, or argue strenuously for control if you can't justify the risk that it poses to your salary. There's one type of personality in particular for whom control is particularly important, and that is creative personalities. If you're the kind of person who feels like you want to have some kind of ownership over what you're doing in your career, if you want to feel like you have your fingerprints all over the processes and the products or the services that are being provided in your workplace, control is probably most important for you. If, on the other hand, you're the type of person who's perfectly happy to follow the exact instructions that you're given on a daily basis, if you're more attracted to just simple processes and things to do, control is less important. If, on the other hand, you're the type of person who's perfectly happy doing the same thing every day with very little creative input, then control is less important for you. And that's totally fine. Here's the most important thing to be thinking about as you're pondering this idea of control or independence in your career. Even if at this point in time, you're not feeling the need to have a lot of control or autonomy, start developing a high level of skills in the career that you're thinking about or the career that you have. so that when the time comes, you will at least have the option to leverage those skills and get some control, some freedom in your work. You would like to at least have that option someday. And the single best way to ensure that you can have control in your work is to be very good at what you do so that you are an asset. If you liked this video, you might enjoy watching the next video in this series, in which I discuss the last of the 3 concepts from Cal Newport's book, the concept of mission or purpose in work. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe so that I can continue creating this content and share it with other people.